I was driving from Kansas City to Nashville after attending a friend's wedding. I left later than planned, which meant most of the drive happened overnight. At first the interstate felt normal. Moderate traffic, truckers passing occasionally, radio playing quietly. But after midnight, everything changed. The highway became almost empty. Long stretches of darkness with only scattered headlights in the distance. Around 1 a.m., I first noticed the SUV. Dark-colored, maybe black or dark blue. At first nothing about it stood out. It sat a few car lengths behind me in the right lane for maybe 10 minutes. Then eventually I passed a semi-truck and changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes too. Again, not unusual. But after another 20 minutes, I realized something strange. No matter how my speed changed, the SUV stayed behind me. Exactly behind me. Sometimes closer. Sometimes farther back. Always there. At first I convinced myself it was coincidence. People travel long distances on interstates all the time. But eventually I started testing it. I sped up significantly. The SUV matched me. I slowed down. So did the SUV. Then I exited briefly near a random gas station, just to see what would happen. The SUV exited too. At that point genuine fear hit me instantly. I pulled into the gas station parking lot expecting the vehicle to continue driving. Instead, the SUV parked across the lot facing directly toward my car. Its headlights stayed on. I couldn't see inside because the windows were heavily tinted. I remember sitting there gripping the steering, while debating whether I should call police immediately. Then the SUV slowly backed out of the parking lot and returned to the interstate. At first I felt relief, until I got back on the highway too, because 5 minutes later, the same headlights appeared behind me again. I called my brother while driving because honestly I started panicking. He immediately told me not to stop anywhere isolated and to head toward the next larger town. For the next hour, the SUV remained behind me. At one point another vehicle briefly got between us. The SUV aggressively switched lanes and passed it almost immediately just to stay directly behind me again. That's when I knew for certain. They were following me intentionally. Then things got worse. Around 3 a.m., I noticed another vehicle joining behind the SUV. An older pickup truck. Both vehicles stayed behind me for miles. And eventually, the pickup moved beside my car briefly. The passenger window rolled down. A man inside pointed ahead toward the next exit ramp, then made a motion with his hand signaling me to pull off. I ignored him completely. The truck slowed back down beside the SUV. At that point my heart was pounding so hard I could barely focus on driving. The next major city sat nearly 40 minutes away, and both vehicles stayed with me the entire time. Eventually I spotted blue highway emergency lights near a construction zone ahead. The second the SUV noticed them, it accelerated suddenly into the left lane and sped away. The pickup followed immediately. I pulled over near the highway patrol officers, almost shaking. Police searched surrounding exits for nearly an hour, but never located either vehicle. But what disturbed one officer most was the behavior pattern. According to him, interstate robbery crews sometimes targeted solo travelers late at night by following them until they stopped somewhere isolated. And in several cases, victims disappeared after pulling off onto rural exits. The interstate cut through long empty desert stretches with almost nothing around except occasional exits every 30 or 40 miles. Around midnight, I noticed hazard lights flashing ahead on the shoulder. A minivan sat partly off the road, and beside it stood a woman holding a little girl. A man waved his flashlight toward traffic desperately. Honestly, I almost kept driving. But seeing a child stranded in the desert heat that late at night made me feel guilty. So I pulled over. The man approached my window, immediately looking relieved. Mid-30s maybe, sweating heavily. He explained their van overheated and their phones had no signal. The woman stood farther back holding the little girl silently. At first the situation seemed completely believable. I offered to call roadside assistance once I reached the next town. But then the man asked, "Can you just drive my wife and daughter to the gas station?" Something about the request made me hesitate. Mostly because the nearest exit was over 20 miles away. The woman suddenly interrupted quietly. "We'll all fit." That immediately made me uncomfortable. I said my car barely had room because of moving boxes, which was partially true. The man's expression changed slightly. Not angry, disappointed. Then he stepped closer to the car door. "Please, It's dangerous out here." At that point I noticed something strange. The little girl hadn't moved once. Not crying, not speaking, just staring toward the ground motionless. Then another thing hit me. The minivan engine wasn't hot. I could tell because no heat waves rose from the hood despite supposedly overheating in the desert. And there was no smell, no steam, nothing. The realization sent immediate panic through me. I told them I'd send help from the next exit and started rolling my window up. The man suddenly grabbed the top of the door hard. "Wait!" The tone changed completely. Cold. Then the woman started walking toward my car fast while still holding the child. I drove off immediately, and when I looked back through the mirror, all three of them stood in the middle of the shoulder watching me leave. Completely still. No waving. No yelling. Just watching. I called Highway Patrol roughly 15 minutes later and reported the stranded family. The dispatcher became strangely serious after hearing the location, then asked, "Did you stop your vehicle?" I said yes briefly. The dispatcher immediately told me officers were already searching that area because of multiple reports involving fake roadside emergencies targeting interstate drivers overnight. According to police, groups would stage breakdowns using women and children to make travelers stop. Victims were often robbed after being lured from vehicles. But what terrified me most happened afterward. When officers searched the location less than 20 minutes later, the minivan was gone. No tire tracks. No people. Nothing. My cousin Ryan started working interstate freight routes transporting storage trailers between Nevada and Utah. Most jobs involved towing large enclosed cargo trailers overnight because roads stayed cooler and less crowded. One night around 2:30 a.m., Ryan drove through a remote interstate stretch outside Salt Lake City, hauling an empty trailer toward a distribution yard. At least, he thought it was empty. The highway was almost deserted except for occasional semi-trucks. And because the trailer behind him was unloaded, the drive felt smoother than usual. Then Ryan heard it. Bang. At first he assumed something inside shifted loose. Maybe chains or equipment left behind accidentally. But roughly a minute later, another bang hit. Louder. Directly behind the cab. Ryan checked mirrors repeatedly, but saw nothing unusual. Then came 3 knocks. Distinct knocks. Bang. 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 Not random movement. Intentional. Ryan later admitted every hair on his body stood up immediately, because he personally inspected the trailer before leaving the distribution yard. It was supposed to be completely empty. He called his supervisor using Bluetooth and explained what he heard. The supervisor laughed, initially assuming cargo straps were bouncing around. Then another loud bang interrupted the call. Even through the phone, his supervisor heard it clearly. That's when the tone changed immediately. The supervisor instructed Ryan not to stop alone anywhere isolated, and instead head toward the next interstate way station roughly 20 miles ahead. For the next 15 minutes, the knocking continued intermittently. Sometimes soft, sometimes violent enough to shake the trailer. At one point Ryan swore he heard screaming too. Muffled screaming. He started genuinely panicking. Then suddenly, the trailer door handles behind him began rattling violently. Ryan could see them shaking through side mirrors. Something inside was trying to get out. He accelerated immediately. But a few minutes later another horrifying thing happened. A white van appeared behind the trailer, moving extremely fast. The van flashed headlights repeatedly, then pulled beside Ryan's truck. A man inside leaned out the passenger window, yelling something Ryan couldn't hear. Then the van driver pointed aggressively toward the trailer. The van stayed beside him for several miles. At first Ryan assumed they tried warning him about mechanical problems. Then the van suddenly swerved behind the trailer extremely close, like they were trying to force him to stop. Ryan refused. By the time he finally reached the way station, both the knocking and the white van disappeared simultaneously. State troopers searched the trailer immediately. Nobody inside. Nothing damaged. No signs anyone had been there. But officers did discover something deeply disturbing. Fresh scratches covered the interior walls near the rear doors. Long scratches, as if someone tried clawing their way out. And according to Ryan, the truly terrifying part came later while reviewing interstate traffic cameras. The white van following him had no visible license plate, and investigators never figured out why it disappeared the exact moment he reached police.